Behind the epic spectacle and record-breaking 11 Academy Awards lies a treasure trove of bizarre secrets that would make even the most devoted film buffs do a double take. From a silent MGM lion and painful contact lenses, to a secret gay subtext that one star never knew existed, this cinematic masterpiece harbored some truly unexpected surprises during its legendary production. The chariot race alone spawned multiple urban legends, while the cast endured everything from vitamin injections to steel-lined costumes. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Ben-Hur. Fact 1. The Silent Lion. When you watch Ben-Hur today, you might notice something strange, right from the very beginning, that breaks a tradition Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer had followed for over 30 years. The famous MGM lion, Leo, appears in his circular frame as always, but something's missing his iconic roar. For the first time in the studio's history, Leo the lion sits completely silent in the opening credits, and this wasn't an accident or technical problem. Director William Wyler made a very deliberate creative decision that went against everything MGM stood for. He believed that hearing the lion's powerful roar would completely destroy the reverent, sacred atmosphere he wanted to create for the film's opening nativity scene. The movie begins with the birth of Jesus Christ, showing Mary, Joseph, and the baby in the manger, accompanied by Miklos Rosa's beautiful flowing musical score. Wyler felt that having a roaring lion interrupt this holy moment would feel jarring and inappropriate. This decision required special permission from the studio executives, since the roaring lion had been MGM's trademark since 1928. The lion's roar was so important to the studio's identity that it appeared before every single MGM film, whether it was a comedy, drama, or action picture. Breaking this tradition was almost unthinkable. Instead of the usual roar, Wyler wanted Rosa's dramatic musical score to begin immediately on the very first frame of the film, creating a seamless transition into the nativity scene. The studio agreed to create a special still-frame version of Leo for Ben-Hur, where the lion simply looks around silently while the orchestral music plays underneath. Only 3 other MGM films had used a silent lion before Ben-Hur, including another religious film called The Next Voice You Hear from 1950. But Ben-Hur became the most famous example of this rare exception to MGM's standard practice, proving that sometimes breaking tradition can serve the story better than following the rules. Fact 2. Stephen Boyd's painful eye ordeal. Stephen Boyd, who played the villainous Masala, endured months of physical discomfort for his role because both he and Charlton Heston had blue eyes, which created a visual problem for director William Wyler. Wyler wanted the two characters to look distinctly different on screen, so he made the decision that Boyd would need to wear brown contact lenses throughout the entire filming process to create a striking contrast between the former friends turned enemies. The contact lenses used in 1958 were nothing like the comfortable, soft lenses people wear today. These were hard, thick pieces of plastic that covered Boyd's entire eye, with only a small hole in the center that he could see through. This design severely restricted his vision and made it difficult for him to perform his scenes naturally. The lenses were also much larger and heavier than modern contacts, sitting uncomfortably on his eyes for hours at a time. What made Boyd's situation even worse was that these primitive contact lenses constantly scratched and irritated his eyes during the long filming days. The production schedule often required 12 to 14 hours of shooting, 6 days a week, which meant Boyd had to endure this pain for extended periods. The irritation became so severe that his eyes would become red, swollen, and watery, making it impossible for him to continue working. The production team had to regularly reschedule scenes and shooting days to give Boyd time to rest his eyes and recover from the constant irritation. This created scheduling headaches for the massive production, which involved thousands of extras and elaborate sets that couldn't easily be rearranged. Despite these challenges, Boyd never complained publicly about the discomfort and completed his performance as one of cinema's most memorable villains. Boyd also had to wear lifts in his shoes to match Charlton Heston's 6 foot 2 inch height and he had originally grown a beard for the role before learning that young Roman tribunes didn't wear facial hair, adding even more physical adjustments to his already demanding preparation. Fact 3. The secret gay subtext. One of Hollywood's most famous examples of hidden meaning in a major film happened when screenwriter Gore Vidal decided to add a secret layer to the relationship between Ben-Hur and Messala that only some people involved in the production would know about. Vidal felt that the script needed a stronger emotional reason for why Messala would turn so viciously against his childhood friend, and he came up with a controversial solution that he kept hidden from the film's star. Vidal wrote the scenes between the two men with the idea that they had been lovers in their youth, and that Messala's return to Jerusalem was motivated by his hope to rekindle their romantic relationship. When Ben-Hur chooses loyalty to his people over loyalty to Messala, Vidal intended this rejection to feel like the pain of a spurned lover rather than just political disagreement. This backstory would explain why Messala becomes so personally vindictive and cruel in his punishment of Ben-Hur's family. After writing these scenes, Vidal approached director William Wyler with his idea, and Wyler thought about it carefully before agreeing to the approach. However, Wyler told Vidal to share this interpretation with Stephen Boyd, who played Messala, but specifically warned him not to tell Charlton Heston anything about it. Wyler believed that Heston would become uncomfortable with the idea and that his performance might suffer if he knew about the hidden romantic subtext. Stephen Boyd was reportedly delighted with this direction and began playing his scenes with Ben-Hur as if he were a man whose romantic feelings had been rejected. Meanwhile, Heston performed his scenes completely unaware of Boyd's acting choices, which actually created an interesting dynamic where Ben-Hur appears genuinely confused and uncomfortable with Messala's intense personal interest in him. Years later, when Vidal publicly revealed this story, Heston strongly disputed the claim and said it irritated him greatly. However, many film scholars continue to debate whether this hidden subtext can be detected in the final performance. Fact 4. Vitamin B injections. Maybe amphetamines. The filming schedule for Ben-Hur was so physically and mentally exhausting that the production team brought a doctor onto the set to help the cast and crew cope with the demanding workload. Everyone involved in the production was working 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 9 months straight, which pushed people to their physical limits and beyond what most film productions required at the time. The doctor offered vitamin B complex injections to anyone who requested them, claiming these shots would help boost energy levels and combat the fatigue that was affecting everyone on set. Cast members, crew workers, and even director William Wyler himself received these injections regularly to help them maintain their stamina during the grueling production schedule. The shots became so popular that many people on set relied on them to get through their long working days. However, years later, Wyler and his family began to suspect that these supposedly helpful vitamin injections contained something much stronger than just B vitamins. Looking back on the experience, Wyler believed the doctor may have been giving everyone amphetamines without telling them what they were actually receiving. This would explain why the injections seemed to provide such dramatic energy boosts and helped people work such extraordinarily long hours without collapsing from exhaustion. During the 1950s, amphetamines were commonly prescribed by doctors for various conditions and were not as strictly regulated as they are today. Many people, including medical professionals, didn't fully understand the potential dangers or addictive properties of these drugs. It was not uncommon for doctors to prescribe amphetamines for weight loss, depression, or fatigue, without fully informing patients about what they were taking. If Wyler's suspicions were correct, it means that much of Ben-Hur was filmed by a cast and crew who were unknowingly taking stimulant drugs to maintain their energy levels. This would make the already impressive physical performances and technical achievements of the film even more remarkable, considering the circumstances under which they were accomplished. Fact 5. The longest film score ever. Composer Miklos Rosa created a musical masterpiece for Ben-Hur that broke all previous records when he wrote 110 minutes of original music for the film. making it the longest movie score ever composed at that time. To put this achievement in perspective, most Hollywood films in the 1950s typically featured between 30 and 60 minutes of original music, which means Rossa nearly doubled what was considered a substantial musical contribution to a major motion picture. The sheer scale of Rossa's composition matched the epic nature of the film itself, as he needed to create musical themes for the nativity scene, the galley sequences, the chariot race, the crucifixion, and dozens of other dramatic moments throughout the 3-hour and 32-minute runtime. Rossa approached each section of the film as if he were composing a classical symphony, with complex orchestrations that required a full orchestra and choir to perform properly. What made this accomplishment even more impressive was that Rossa composed all of this music by hand, writing out every note for every instrument in the orchestra without the aid of modern computer software or synthesizers. He had to create separate musical themes for different characters, locations, and emotional moments, then weave them together in ways that would enhance the storytelling without overwhelming the dialogue or action on screen. The recording sessions for the score required weeks of work with the London Symphony Orchestra and various choirs, as they had to perform and record every single minute of Rossa's composition. The music became so integral to the film's success that many people could hum the main theme years after seeing the movie, and the score influenced how epic films would use music for more than 15 years afterward. Rossa's Ben-Hur score became a template for future epic films, showing that audiences could handle and appreciate much longer musical compositions when they were properly integrated into a grand cinematic experience. The record for longest film score would eventually be broken by other composers, but Rossa's work on Ben-Hur remained a landmark achievement in film music history. Fact 6. Missing limbs for realism. When it came time to film the brutal sea battle sequence where Ben-Hur serves as a galley slave, the production team decided they wanted the aftermath of the naval combat to look as realistic and shocking as possible. Editor John Dunning came up with an unusual casting strategy that would create genuinely disturbing visuals without relying entirely on movie magic or special effects makeup that might look fake on camera. Dunning actively sought out Italian extras who had actually lost arms, legs, or other body parts in real life, whether from accidents, war injuries, or medical conditions. This approach meant that when these men appeared on screen as wounded Roman sailors and galley slaves, their missing limbs would look completely authentic because they were real. The casting directors specifically looked for people with amputations that would match the types of injuries that might occur during an ancient naval battle. Once they found these extras, the makeup crews took their work to the next level by adding prosthetic bones, fresh blood, and torn flesh effects to make it appear as if these injuries had just happened during the sea battle. They rigged fake bone pieces to stick out from the amputation sites and covered everything with realistic-looking blood and torn skin to create the illusion that these men had just lost their limbs in the fighting. The combination of real missing limbs with fresh-looking special effects makeup created some of the most convincing battle injury footage ever captured on film at that time. This technique was far more effective than trying to hide fake prosthetic stumps under clothing or using camera angles to suggest injuries that weren't really there. This approach reflected the lengths that William Wyler and his team were willing to go to achieve realism in their epic production. They understood that audiences would be able to tell the difference between genuine physical authenticity and movie trickery, especially in close-up shots where every detail would be visible on the big screen in the new widescreen format they were using. Fact 7. The producer died during filming. In the middle of production on Ben-Hur, the massive film project suffered a devastating blow when executive producer Sam Zimbalist suddenly died of a heart attack while working in Rome. Zimbalist had been the driving force behind getting the film made and had spent years developing the project, convincing MGM to invest $15 million in what would become the most expensive movie ever produced at that time. Zimbalist's death created an immediate crisis for the production because he had been handling all the business decisions, budget management, and logistical coordination for the enormous undertaking that involved thousands of cast and crew members working across multiple locations in Italy. As the producer, he was responsible for making sure the money was being spent properly, the shooting schedule stayed on track, and all the complex moving parts of the production worked together smoothly. With no time to bring in a replacement producer from Hollywood, director William Wyler had to step up and take on both roles simultaneously. This meant that Wyler was now responsible for directing all the scenes, working with the actors on their performances, overseeing the technical aspects of filming, and also managing the business side of the production that Zimbalist had been handling. The additional workload put enormous pressure on Wyler, who was already working 14-hour days trying to manage one of the most complex film productions in Hollywood history. He had to make financial decisions about cost overruns, negotiate with Italian suppliers and crew members, and handle communications with MGM executives back in California, all while maintaining his focus on the creative aspects of directing the film. MGM eventually gave Wyler an additional $100,000 in compensation for taking on the producer responsibilities, but the studio also brought in J.J. Cohn to help with some of the business duties. Despite these challenges, Wyler managed to complete the film successfully, though Zimbalist never lived to see the finished product that he had worked so hard to bring to the screen. Fact 8. Charlton Heston's 16-take struggle. Director William Wyler was famous for being an absolute perfectionist who would demand take after take until he got exactly what he wanted from his actors. But one particular moment with Charlton Heston became legendary for how many times they had to repeat a single line of dialogue. During a crucial scene where Ben-Hur declares his identity and heritage, Heston had to say the simple phrase, "I'm a Jew," 16 different times before Wyler was satisfied with the performance. This wasn't just a matter of getting the words right or dealing with technical problems like sound issues or camera malfunctions. Wyler felt that Heston wasn't making the character of Judah Ben-Hur believable enough, and that his delivery of this important line didn't capture the right emotional weight or authenticity that the moment required. The director wanted Heston to find the perfect balance of pride, defiance, and vulnerability in those three simple words. Wyler had a reputation for being extremely demanding with his actors, often pushing them through dozens of takes without clearly explaining what he wanted them to change or improve. Many actors found working with him frustrating because he would keep asking for more takes without giving specific direction about what wasn't working in their performance. Heston later described this experience as one of the most challenging aspects of working with Wyler throughout the production. The struggle over this particular line reflected Wyler's broader concerns about Heston's performance throughout the film. The director worried that Heston wasn't fully connecting with the character's Jewish identity and the cultural and religious significance that should drive Ben-Hur's actions and motivations. Wyler wanted audiences to believe completely in Ben-Hur as a Jewish prince fighting against Roman oppression, not just see Charlton Heston playing a role. This perfectionist approach was typical of Wyler's directing style and contributed to the film's eventual success, but it also made the production process much more difficult and time-consuming for everyone involved, especially the actors who had to endure his relentless pursuit of the perfect performance. Fact 9. The pottery kick obsession. William Wyler's perfectionist tendencies reached almost comical levels during the filming of a scene where Ben-Hur returns to his destroyed family home after years of slavery, and Charlton Heston accidentally created a sound effect that the director became completely fixated on recreating. The scene required Heston to walk through the ruins of his former house, taking in the devastation that had occurred while he was away. But during one of the takes, Heston accidentally kicked a piece of broken pottery that made a particular sound that caught Wyler's attention. Wyler immediately fell in love with this accidental sound effect because he felt it perfectly captured the loneliness and emptiness of the destroyed home, adding an extra layer of emotional impact to what was supposed to be a simple walking scene. The sound of Heston's foot connecting with the pottery debris created exactly the kind of atmospheric detail that Wyler believed would make the scene more powerful and realistic for audiences. However, when Wyler asked Heston to recreate the pottery kick for additional takes, Heston had no idea what the director was talking about, because the kick had been completely unintentional. Heston had been focused on his performance and hadn't even noticed that he had kicked anything during the scene. This led to a frustrating situation where Wyler kept demanding more takes of Heston, walking through the ruins and trying to kick the pottery in exactly the same way, while Heston couldn't understand what was missing from his performance. After several failed attempts to recreate the sound, Heston finally asked Wyler directly what he wanted, and the director explained that he was trying to capture that specific pottery kicking sound from the first take. Heston was amazed that Wyler had become so focused on such a tiny detail, and he later wondered why the director hadn't just asked him to kick the pottery again instead of making him guess what was wrong with his performance through multiple mysterious retakes. Fact 10. 1925 film star's cameo. Hidden somewhere in the crowd scenes of the 1959 Ben-Hur is actress Mae McAvoy, who had played the female lead role of Esther in the original 1925 silent version of the same story, making her the only person to appear in both MGM adaptations of the biblical epic. McAvoy's appearance in the newer film was completely uncredited, meaning her name doesn't appear anywhere in the cast listings or credits, and most moviegoers had no idea they were seeing a piece of Hollywood history walking among the extras. By 1959, McAvoy was no longer the major star she had been during the silent film era, when she appeared opposite some of the biggest names in early Hollywood and played leading roles in prestigious productions. The film industry had changed dramatically with the introduction of sound pictures in the late 1920s, and many silent film stars found their careers ending when audiences and studios moved on to talking pictures. McAvoy's original performance as Esther in the 1925 Ben-Hur had been one of her most important roles, as that film was one of the most expensive and ambitious productions of the silent era. She had worked alongside Ramon Novarro, who played Ben-Hur in that earlier version, and had been part of a production that was famous for its spectacular chariot race and elaborate sets, though it was also notorious for safety problems that led to injuries and deaths during filming. Her cameo appearance in the 1959 version represents a touching connection between the two eras of Hollywood filmmaking, linking the silent period with the modern widescreen spectacles that were dominating theaters in the late 1950s. While William Wyler had actually worked as an assistant director on the original 1925 film, McAvoy was the only performer who could claim to have been part of both productions, even though her role in the newer version was just a brief, anonymous appearance in the crowd. Fact 11. The urban legend, death myth. One of the most persistent urban legends in movie history claims that a stuntman was killed during the filming of the chariot race in the 1959 Ben-Hur, and that his death is actually visible in the final cut of the film. But this dramatic story is completely false and stems from confusion between two different movie productions made 34 years apart. The legend has become so widespread that many people continue to believe it despite clear evidence that no one died during the filming of the Charlton Heston version. The confusion comes from the fact that there really was a fatal accident during the chariot race filming, but it happened during the original 1925 silent version of Ben-Hur, not the famous 1959 remake. During the production of that earlier film, a stuntman was indeed killed when his chariot crashed and he was thrown from the vehicle, landing on a pile of lumber and dying from internal injuries. Francis Ten, Bushman, who played Masala in the silent version, witnessed the accident and described how the wheel broke on the chariot, causing the man to be launched 30 feet into the air. The 1959 production was actually much safer than its predecessor, with legendary stuntman Yakima Canutt serving as the stunt coordinator and implementing careful safety measures throughout the filming. Charlton Heston specifically stated in his autobiography that no one was seriously injured during the filming of the chariot race scenes, and fact-checking organizations have repeatedly debunked the death rumors. What makes this urban legend so believable is that people can point to dramatic moments in the chariot race where stuntmen appear to be thrown from their chariots or trampled by horses, but these are all carefully planned stunts using safety equipment and dummies for the most dangerous shots. The legend has been attached to practically every dramatic moment in the race sequence, with different versions of the story claiming different stuntmen died in different ways, which should be a clue that the stories aren't based on actual events. Fact 12. Joe Knut's real near-death fall. While most of the dangerous-looking moments in the Ben-Hur chariot race were carefully planned and executed with safety measures in place, one terrifying accident happened completely by surprise and nearly cost stuntman Joe Knut his life. Yet this genuine moment of peril ended up creating one of the most memorable and exciting sequences in the entire race. Joe Knut was the son of legendary stunt coordinator Yakima Knut and was serving as Charlton Heston's stunt double during the more dangerous driving sequences that required expert chariot handling skills. During the filming of a sequence where Ben-Hur's chariot had to jump over the wreckage of another crashed chariot, the 4 horses pulling Joe's chariot had been specially trained to leap over obstacles, and the stunt was supposed to be routine. However, when the horses made their jump, something went wrong with the chariot's landing, and Joe was unexpectedly thrown forward out of the chariot and onto the wooden shaft that connected the vehicle to the horses. For several heart-stopping seconds, Joe hung on to the front of the chariot while being dragged along the track at high speed, with his father Yakima watching in horror from the sidelines, certain that his son was about to be killed. The dangerous situation could have ended with Joe being trampled by the horses or crushed under the chariot wheels, but he managed to pull himself back up onto the chariot and regain control of the reins, suffering only a deep cut on his chin that required 4 stitches. The cameras kept rolling during the entire accident, capturing every moment of Joe's terrifying fall and dramatic recovery. When the footage was reviewed, director William Wyler and the editing team realized they had captured something extraordinary that looked far more exciting and realistic than any planned stunt could have achieved. They decided to use the real accident footage in the final film, editing it together with close-up shots of Charlton Heston climbing back into his chariot to create a seamless sequence that audiences assume was carefully choreographed. Fact 13. Steel-lined costume for trampling. Stephen Boyd was willing to perform most of his own stunts during the chariot race sequence, including the dangerous scene where his character Masala gets thrown from his chariot and dragged underneath the horses and wheels of other racing chariots. To protect Boyd during this extremely hazardous sequence, the costume department created a special version of his Roman armor that had steel plating hidden underneath the fabric and leather to shield his body from serious injury. The steel-lined costume was necessary because Boyd insisted on doing the close-up shots himself rather than using a stunt double, wanting to give the most authentic performance possible for what would be Masala's dramatic death scene. The hidden armor was carefully designed to protect his chest, back, and sides from the weight of horses stepping on him and the impact of chariot wheels rolling over his body, while still allowing him to move naturally and maintain the appearance of wearing regular Roman military clothing. Boyd wore this protective costume for the shots where he appears to be getting trampled and dragged along the track surface, but the most dangerous moments where he would actually be run over by horses and chariots were filmed using a specially designed dummy that looked exactly like him. The production team created this realistic dummy to handle the shots that would have been genuinely life-threatening, even with steel armor protection. The combination of Boyd's protected close-up performance and the dummy for the most extreme moments created a convincing sequence that looked like one continuous action, with audiences having no idea that different techniques were being used for different parts of Masala's death scene. Boyd's willingness to endure the discomfort of wearing heavy steel armor under his costume in the Italian heat demonstrated his commitment to making the scene as realistic and powerful as possible. The steel-lined costume approach showed how the production team was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to achieve authenticity while still maintaining reasonable safety standards for their actors, even when filming some of the most dangerous action sequences ever attempted in a Hollywood production. Fact 14. 1 million pounds of plaster. The massive sets for Ben-Hur required an almost unimaginable amount of artistic craftsmanship, with the production using over 1 million pounds of plaster and employing 200 skilled artists and workmen to create the hundreds of statues, friezes, and decorative elements that filled every corner of the elaborate Roman and Jewish architecture throughout the film. This enormous undertaking meant that the art department had to function more like a Renaissance sculpture workshop than a typical movie production team. The scale of this artistic effort was necessary because William Wyler and his production designers wanted every set to look completely authentic and historically accurate, filled with a kind of detailed artwork that would have decorated real Roman buildings, Jewish homes, and public spaces during the time of Christ. Rather than using painted backdrops or simple props that would look fake in the new widescreen format, they decided to create actual three-dimensional artwork that could withstand close-up photography and maintain the illusion of reality. The 200 artists working on these decorative elements included experienced sculptors, painters, and craftsmen who had to research ancient Roman and Jewish artistic styles to make sure their work looked historically appropriate. They created everything from small decorative bowls and household items to massive statues that stood several stories tall, all using traditional plaster casting techniques that required weeks or months to complete each piece. The workshop where all this artistic creation took place became a small factory dedicated entirely to producing Ben-Hur artwork, with different teams working on different types of decorative elements simultaneously. Some artists specialized in creating the detailed friezes that decorated the walls of Roman buildings, while others focused on sculpting individual statues or working on smaller props that would be handled by the actors during scenes. This massive investment in handcrafted artwork contributed significantly to the film's $15 million budget, but it also created sets that looked more authentic and impressive than anything that had been achieved in previous Hollywood productions, helping to establish Ben-Hur as the gold standard for epic filmmaking. Fact 15. Jesus was a missionary. Claude Heater, the actor who portrayed Jesus Christ in Ben-Hur, brought a unique personal background to this sacred role because he had actually served as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the eastern United States before beginning his acting career. This real-life experience of dedicating years of his life to preaching and teaching about Jesus Christ gave Heater an unusual preparation for playing the most important religious figure in Christian history. Heater's casting as Jesus was particularly significant because his role in the film, while limited in screen time, was crucial to the story's spiritual impact and required an actor who could convey the divine nature of Christ without speaking any dialogue. Throughout the movie, Jesus appears in key moments like giving water to Ben-Hur during his march to the galleys, delivering the Sermon on the Mount, and during the crucifixion scene, but the character's power comes entirely from Heater's physical presence and expression rather than spoken words. The decision to cast someone with genuine missionary experience reflected the production team's commitment to treating the religious aspects of the story with appropriate reverence and authenticity. Having an actor who had spent years studying Christian teachings and sharing his faith with others brought a level of spiritual preparation to the role that most Hollywood actors would not have possessed. Heater's missionary background also meant that he understood the responsibility that came with portraying Jesus on screen, especially in a film that would be seen by millions of people around the world, and had received official approval from the Vatican. His experience in representing his faith in real-world situations prepared him for the challenge of embodying Christ in a way that would be respectful to Christian audiences, while still serving the dramatic needs of the epic story. This casting choice demonstrated how William Wyler and his team were willing to look beyond traditional Hollywood talent pools to find actors whose personal experiences and backgrounds would enhance the authenticity and spiritual depth of their biblical epic.